Well, hey y'all, welcome to our LinkedIn event, Bridging Brilliance, Leveraging Strengths, and Embracing Neurodiversity. I always like to go over the community agreements. So keep your microphone on mute, turn on your camera if possible. It helps us with being able to read and communicate with those nonverbals. And then please use the chat if you have any questions or comments related to the topic that we're discussing. And be friendly, be respectful. So I'm going to intro myself and then I'll tee it off to Anna as well. I'm Stina Bortz. My pronouns are she, her, and hers with Keymaker Services. And I am the productivity and neurodiversity expert for companies that they're looking to unlock the power of their employees through neuro inclusion. So there's a lot, we'll go through the terms, all the neuros, but basically I'm providing training and consultation around the unique cognitive abilities of individuals and teams with the goal of increasing productivity, employee engagement, and retention. And that's a lot of what we'll also talk about. Anna and I have lots of crossovers in this area. Aside from the work that I love, I'm also a pretty badass fisherwoman. I love that. I've gotten to have a few really, really awesome experiences in the last couple of years, like in Sitka and in Vancouver. I've even done spear snook fishing, so I love that. And I'll give you a fun one. I love mayonnaise on absolutely everything.
Ooh, but is it Hellman's mayonnaise?
It can be. I actually like Kewpie too because it's really got that umami taste to it.
Yep, Kewpie's a good one.
And during the pandemic, I actually ordered like cases where I would have it in a closet that turned into a pantry. But Anna, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and introduce
Yes. Well, we
yourself?
already know that I love Hellman's mayonnaise. Okay, so my name's Anna Oakes. Hi, peeps. A little bit about me. I've spent the last 17 years of my career doing what I call people strategy work. And so inside companies, that has looked like leading HR, that has looked like operational roles. I've been a head of people. And for the last 8 years, I've been on my own. And what I do, I'm a growth Sherpa. So I help companies, small companies who are looking to grow, and they are either growing or maybe they're getting ready to sell at some point or transition leadership. That's really where I come in and not only strengthen the leadership team, but strengthen the strengthen the employee base too. So love this work that I've been doing. I'm also a mama. That's when my kids were littler. It's the only picture I have permission to share because they are now 13 and have very high standards for what pictures get shared where. But Asher and Juniper are the loves of my life, and I share them with my husband Scott. So just a really great motivation for me, for sure.
Mhm. Yes.
Ah, Anna and Stina origin story.
Yes. Well, we are each other's clients. We are each other's collaboration partners. We are friends. We've really shifted into all of these different roles together, and I've enjoyed it. Our work crosses over, so it's really fun jamming with you, Anna, on that. But it's also being able to share in that space of neurodivergent
Yeah.
as well. Like
And for
that.
me, we've known each other for years now, but for me, I think if we were collaborators, it would take us to one level. But the fact
Mhm.
that I get to be your client and
Yeah.
you've worked with me on my own neurodiversity and you've worked with my son too, like that's where I really get to know what the work you do and how powerful it is. So thank you for being my coach all these years.
My pleasure. And
Mhm.
as well as like myself being able to be your client and take in your knowledge with focusing on strengths and the assessment of that, because that is the focus of my work with building skills and executive function as well. So there's so much. What I love is that through our collaboration, and then friendship, we get that depth and that vulnerability. That friendship came after that collaboration and then opening that up, which is so essential in any working relationship. But then when you take it to that level, you also get something that enriches further, right?
Right. It really deepens our work, and I think you made me a better partner. So
Mhm.
for my clients, that helps.
Yeah, awesome. I love this. To me, I'm looking at this picture and going, "Are we going to frolic and go on a Jumanji? Is this like the Garden of Eden?"
You're in your garden bonnet. I say we're gonna go plant some weed, like pull some weeds or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think where we could start off, we could really start off with how change happens. How do we enter into this space with teams and
Yeah.
professionals? And really that the first step is awareness.
Yeah, the first step is awareness. And, Cornell University did this study, and Sienna and I love to talk about this because they looked at what makes the successful CEO. So they looked at all these companies of like the company was successful, the CEO was successful. Why was that? And it wasn't strategic thinking. It wasn't their analytical thinking. It was their level of self-awareness. How well did they know themselves and their not only their strengths, but maybe their potential blind spots. And then how well did they know that of other people too, right? Because self-awareness leads to other awareness, which
Right.
leads to the elusive, what I call organizational awareness. And if you think about it, for whoever's on the phone, I just want you to stop and think right now. If you work for someone else, your goal should be organizational awareness, right? How can I understand the landscape with which I'm working? How do
Mhm.
I know what they are about, what they're not about, and how do I help make that come to fruition? That's the magic sauce, right? When you can do that, when you understand what you have to offer, your strengths, your weaknesses, how your brain works, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today with Stina. That awareness, that self leads to other, leads to organizational, and that's really where I think our goal should be.
Right. And being able to have the language of being specific. So this is how my brain works, and this is how I'm going to communicate it. If we aren't given language, there's nothing to work with. There's no cord that we can pick up and plug in and plug into the person next to us, right? And download. We have to have something that takes that experience from within us, that invisible experience, and communicates it out in a way that can be received. And then, so it's like, it's giving the language for the data to be received so that we can actually use it to make change, to be innovative, to complete tasks and work well together, and then also see each other.
Yeah. Like, how do we get the data and then use the data,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I don't think we do that enough, right? I know we don't do that enough. We see it with our clients, like there's power in the pause of self-reflection to truly take an intake of where you are right now, what you are using your skills and abilities to influence, and how you can do that better. So the how is what we really want to focus on today.
Right.
So why don't we start, Stina, with just like the intersection of strengths and performance, neurodiversity and performance? Why don't we start there? Let me say a little bit about strengths first off. So one of the things I've been doing this for a number of years, as I shared, I wanted to have an assessment that I used in my business that was positive, that was forward-looking. I've had experience with a lot of them, Myers-Briggs, DISC, all that stuff. And they're all great for what they offer, right? But the one that I chose is through Gallup. So Gallup is a great organization, a great research organization, and they have had a tool that was formerly called StrengthsFinder. So you might know it called StrengthsFinder. They actually rebranded to Clifton Strengths a few years ago, but this assessment is so positive and forward-looking. And the thing that I love about it is that it gives you back all 34. You see all those words underneath there: achiever, arranger, belief, activator, command, communication. It tells you where all 34 of those energies lie with you. So what are your top strengths? What's at the bottom of your list? What might you need to be aware of that could be blind spots? But it puts everything in context that you have the ability to reach out for these things when you need them, right? But we want to play at the top of our list where our top 10 really strengths shine. We want to play at the top of our list, know what's at the bottom of our list so that we are making educated decisions, again, based on the data, right? We've got data in front of us that helps us better understand ourselves. What are we going to do with that data?
Right.
What about you? What's
And
the
I love,
neurodiversity?
yeah, I love this too, because and we've obviously worked with this too. And I've experienced where I've looked at my own language here. It gives you a medium to communicate. And I think the crossover between our work is definitely because the assessments I do focus on those executive functioning skills. So where are you at and how do you experience attention management? So we know that there's different levels of attention and you have to shift your focus throughout the day. And the level of skill, being able to manage that, you have to say, well, today I'm here and tomorrow I'm here, and be able to communicate that. So then you're making those plans of supporting yourself and self-accommodation, which I know we'll get into later. I'm going to jump like 3 chapters ahead, of course. But if you are able to assess attention, your ability, your metacognition is like thinking about your thinking. This is totally metacognition. The language, being able to communicate. I know that my thoughts run this way, and this is how I'm managing it. How's my communication skills? How are my social emotional skills? How are my task completion skills? So the crossover here is knowing what type of thinker you are and what are your strengths. And then how does that lend itself into when you've taken this probe of where are my skills at in executive functioning skills, which are basically, I call it the glue. It's the glue for any other skills that maybe is a career specific skill, but everybody needs executive functioning to do anything. You
Can you
cannot.
define, because we
So
hear that term a lot, Stina, what is executive functioning? How do I know if I have it or if I don't?
everybody has executive functioning skills on some level. And it does change, that we have our skills are influenced by the environment, how aware, our awareness, how aware we are of them, and our own strategies and tools that we have for managing them. And so I always like to go into like just the different areas because it's a big umbrella. So I said attention, I said how that metacognition, your ability to think about your thinking, like can you think in that abstract way? Your social emotional skills. So like, can you regulate? Can you manage your emotions? Like, hey, I'm feeling activated. I'm feeling in my body more stress. Like, how aware are you with that? And what tools are you using to bring your nervous system down so your frontal lobe, which is in charge of keeping your attention on a task, doesn't shut down. So like when people say they're in a stressful situation and they freeze, you go into that like fight or flight. What's happening there, it's the same, is they're not going to be able to manage their attention or complete anything because that frontal lobe is shutting down. And it's influencing all of their executive functioning skills, which is the big umbrella term of talking about like, if you are assigned to analyze data and write a report, you are not going to be able to do that without managing your attention, without using language to communicate what you're finding, without regulating your attention and your emotions not long enough to keep your energy up to complete the task.
But look, let me tell you my origin story really quick of figuring out that I am neurodiverse. So this was during the pandemic. My twins were like, I don't know, what were they, 10 at the time when it started, and we had to do homeschool. And I was sitting next to my son. He needed more help than my daughter did. So I'm sitting next to him and we're doing these lessons together. I mean, thank goodness I was self-employed. I was able to sit down with him, but we're doing these lessons together. We'd watch a video and then I'd look at him and go like, do you know what to do? And he'd like, no, do you know what to do? And I thought, and we were so similar in the way that we were approaching this. Like it started my thinking of like, I'm not firing on all cylinders right now. And that was probably because I didn't have preparation for the activity that I was doing. I also, admittedly, even though this was only a few years ago, still didn't understand how my brain worked. I think it just has opened up such a realm for me to embrace aspects of the way that I work and the way that I learn. And that's what we're talking about today is everybody on the phone, neurodiverse or not, strengths or not, like we can affect our performance. That's it. If we can be intentional about our performance, we can create something different out of the effort.
Right. And probably what you discovered is as you were becoming more intentional about like managing your environment, about setting yourself up with the tools, this is at this time of day works best for me because you started doing self-observation and collecting data on yourself. You started realizing, hey, when I go to this specific spot, my brain is trained to like, this is work time because I've created this ritual, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we can do, and it's the same as it's managing any behavior. Attention and managing your attention is managing a behavior. And so the more you know how human behavior works and how your own human behavior works and your tendency, which we all have, there's two ways to go. We either seek or we avoid. We want it or we don't. It's either pleasure or pain. And that's just basic instinctual. And so we have to know about what is that feeding? Why are we doing that? What's the antecedent, which is the fancy word of like what triggers this, what makes, what's making us do that? And then what can we do proactively about the environment or like through education. Normally there's 3 different areas that we use to intervene on ourselves or on others to change a behavior. And that's going to be education, so training or lessons, coaching, co-processing, which is another fancy word of just saying like, talk this out with me, work through this situation, this experience together so that I'm not just off on my own island and I have someone to work through it with. So that's co-processing.
That's that collaboration that all the leaders want, right? Like you want to be good at collaboration, you need to be good at co-processing.
Yes. And being in that moment with that person, asking them what is their experience, which actually that just triggered another thought is like, as you're trying to figure out, how much of my team is quote unquote, neurodivergent, which by the way, we don't really need to know. We don't really need them to disclose. Nobody needs to be diagnosed to be neuro-inclusive. When we're neuro-inclusive and we're choosing to bring neuro-inclusion into the workplace, we're just saying we recognize everybody's nervous system functions differently, and we are going to bring that into our conversations when we're making decisions. I don't need to know what your label is, because the other thing is like labels change. The book that says this is what is diagnosably XYZ, that changes as there's more and more data and research. So we always have this tendency as humans, we want a label, we want to put in a box because it feels so much more comfortable that way, right? If it's open and it's loosey-goosey and flows, we don't like that. It's not very tidy, but really that's where we need to sit in, is just say, what is your experience? When you come into work and you're in an open work environment, how does your nervous system interact? Are you having energy leaks where you're having to use so much mental energy to stay focused that you are exhausted? You're going to the bathroom like every 30 minutes just so you can have some reset time so you can get back on track?
Yep.
Or is it stimulating? It's that I've talked about this like in our last event. It rolled off and I said the Goldilocks stimulus. You want something just right. You can't have too much because that'll shut you down. You can't have too little because then you aren't engaging in what you're working on. So knowing that about yourself and knowing that about your team and being able to observe that, like when you look over and you see somebody just kind of lost, they're probably overstimulated.
Right. And this is why I love talking about neuroinclusivity when we talk about performance in a company, for 2 reasons. One, because I think it gives leaders something like a new marching order. Leadership has changed a lot over the past 3 or 4 years, and I'm proud of it. The world of work has changed, right? We're rethinking how we used to work. But when you have that level of awareness, I think for a leader to understand this could be the thing that helps me break through with my team, right? By just understanding and again, talking to myself as a leader saying like, all right, if everybody is working differently, how can we start to accommodate to those differences? How can we start to leverage those differences? Because it's not just about accommodation, it's about leveraging them and putting them to work. So, Stina, why don't you tell us the intersection of neurodiversity and performance?
So what is, you just teed me up perfectly. I love that. I can geek right into the stats here. Is what's wonderful is that when you have neurodiversity awareness and you're actively bringing this into your training, you're giving the language, you're bringing this into your decisions, your productivity goes up. And the recent reports get into 48% of productivity goes up. And that's not just saying like 48% of identified neurodivergent folks. That's all. So you're influencing the entire organization, the entire team on that level. And then you're getting that engagement from employees that goes up too by 20%. So these numbers are insanely high. And it makes sense to me because not only, before I get into that, but also then your turnover. So your attention goes up, your turnover goes down. So we've got 48%, 20%, 34%. I mean, these are big, big numbers. And it makes sense to me because not only are you targeting the skills that are required to complete a task successfully and efficiently, you're giving them, you're sharpening that blade and you're making the gears shift more, they're oiled, they're flowing. You're giving them the ability and knowing how to drive this vehicle of the most valuable asset that your company and they have, which is their brain. And then you're also seeing them. and you're giving them the language to communicate. So you're making a really smart business decision that gets you more out of your employees. You're also treating them like humans. So now we are speaking to that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing, basic human needs of belonging, of being seen, of being safe, of being able to communicate and advocate and collaborate all in one swoop. That's going to make a huge impact. And it's also going to be that the investment that you're taking of providing these skills and giving this language and establishing this in the culture is that you are investing in somebody at one level in one role, and they are going to take it to their next role. So you can you're getting the returns over and over. It doesn't mean that when they go into another role, you've lost what you've just invested in as a skill. They transfer.
Yeah.
And they build. And then now they're influencing the next phase or the next level of your company and trickling down.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't even say trickling down. It's like going up and down.
Yeah, but that like begets like, right? We're going to have an adjustment. A team is an amoeba, right? Just like us as a team has a personality, just like a person has a personality, and they have all these facets to them that are like so rich and we're able to tap into them at the right time, right? So like I really want us to be able to take a step back personally, everybody on this call, if it is whether you're neurodiverse or not, and maybe, Stina, why don't we go to the definition slide? I think that would help us out if we're going to be throwing out some words.
Absolutely, that's a good call.
Let's just go over that really quick.
So neurodiversity is your big umbrella. It's the concept saying that there is diversity in our nervous system and how we experience it. And and it's a spectrum. So I like to use my hands when I talk about it. So I say neurodivergent is on one end, neurotypical is on the other. And I struggle with the term neurotypical because to me that translates to normal. And then I go right into I don't like that. That seems like it's only a setting on the dryer. Right? And so where we are is we've got neurotypical and we've got neurodivergent and we have everything in between. That is that diversity in the nervous system that everybody's experiencing. So maybe somebody isn't quite on this end where they are meeting that medical diagnosis definition. But you don't need that to say, I'm going to be neuro-inclusive and I can accept the knowledge that our nervous systems are different. Like I'm sitting right next to you. My nervous system is not going to be the same as yours. I think that we can actively say, yeah, that's truth, right? And I don't really need to know if you have a diagnosis or not to have that in my thought process. It is my choice to say, how do you experience and how do you work well? How can you communicate that to me? Oh, you don't have the language? Let's start making some agreements on this language. So that's exactly what we're doing right here. So we're saying, when we say neurodiversity, it's the big umbrella. When we say neurodivergent, it's this one polar end. So that's the labels that we go towards. Neurotypical is on the other end. And then neuroinclusion is the choice to include this information in our decisions, in our community as a whole.
Something you said, Stina, that I don't want to get lost in there in all the definitions is you gave a question, right? Can you repeat it and I'll try to cue you up to see if you remember what you said, but you were sort of trying to identify what a leader could ask of someone else of their habits. What could they say? Let's give some tangible ways that we could ask about this, knowing that we're not going to say, are you neurodiverse?
Right. That would be inappropriate.
Right.
So you're going to just say, you could say, what is your experience on a daily? I mean, I get very informal with this. You can also share. You say, hey, so I know, give me an example. I know that I need to start my day and with a landing strip kind of warming up, but I know I'm going to be on fire from like 10 to 1. That's my experience. My experience is that I need to manage the auditory, so like the noise around me, or there's going to be some energy leaks, some focus leaks. I'm not going to be on task as much. I'm going to get frustrated. So it's going to be harder for me to interact with others as well and follow conversations. So that's me sharing. So a leader can share what's their experience, give an example and say, what's your experience? How do you work? What do you notice about yourself? And if they don't have an answer what's really cool is that you've already planted that seed for them to start observing, and they will come back to you. You can go, that's fine. You don't need to know now. I'll ask you tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm just really curious. I care. This is going to help us work better together.
I'm glad you used the word curious. I think that as anything, as a partner, as a teammate, we need to be just curious about how other people like to work and pay attention through a self-reflection process for us to understand how our brain works. So we've talked a little bit about those typical experiences. I also know that we have interrupters. You mentioned a few of them, like noise is one of yours for you, but talk to me about these interrupters, because I think as much as we have these visible experiences, we also have the invisible.
Yeah. And the invisible are the ones, that's why you have to ask, what's your experience? You have to, because we can't get inside. We don't have that cord like that I referenced. So the invisible, a lot of it could be that management of attention. So when inside our heads, we go through different types of attention. So sustained attention is like monotasking. We can do that for a period of time. And that's a muscle, that's a skill. But inside our heads, often you're working on something, somebody comes up and says, hey, Stina, what about this question? Now I'm alternating my attention to something else, another task, not my main task. And it is a skill for me to bring it back. And I, with my neurodiversity, know this is a struggle for me. So I have to do something that's going to support me, and I'm going to self-accommodate. So I do come back to that main task.
Okay, so we've got attention management struggles. What else do we have?
So we have sensory, and everybody has a level of sensitivity to sensory. So that's like touch, hearing, so auditory, light, touch, taste. You're going through your senses, right? And we all process information through our senses. Some of us have more sensitivity in certain areas than others. And that's something we should know and be able to communicate, because that's something you have to manage when you're taking in the information, not just information as in like words, reports, information as in what's the temperature in the room? Is that taking away or giving to me for my ability to work and be successful and interact?
I have two common interrupters, these invisible experiences that come up for me. And one of them is intrusive thoughts, right? Where it's just like, everyone comes right in, and like, we can talk about imposter syndrome, whatever those thoughts are, but intrusive thoughts is one of mine. And also body anxiety. I can feel before I think about it and how I'm feeling anxious, I can feel it in my body. Those two things are really prominent for me.
Yep. And that's going to end it. And if you don't know how to regulate that, how to manage that within yourself, because nobody has ever brought it up, even in conversation, you're just like, I'm uncomfortable. That's all you know. Or maybe you don't even know enough to say, I'm uncomfortable.
Yep. And tying this to strengths, when I coach executives on their strengths, they'll often identify times where they feel uncomfortable. And if we can whittle it back, it's because they're operating in a lower talent pool. They're pulling from the bottom of their strengths list. They're not pulling from the top. They're not trying to operate in a way that is most authentic to them.
Yeah.
Right? So
right.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have attention management, body anxiety, intrusive thoughts, overstimulation, understimulation. So that's the sensory. Is it too much? Is it too little? Remember, I talked about how the Goldilocks is the goal, right? You want that just right stimulus.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the other things that's kind of a stem off of that is social cues is something that comes up with neurodiversity too.
Tell me understanding social cues.
Just clocking them too. Maybe understanding or even clocking them. I mean, I know for me, sometimes I just miss it because of my attention management, or I take in way too much. Right.
So that's an attention management issue, right?
In that.
So that's an attention management opportunity, right?
That can be an attention management with a tentacle into social cues. Yeah.
Okay. Let's throw up a poll, because I want to hear what the people on the call. Put yourself, you might be an HR professional, you're a leader, you might be thinking about other people, but I want you to think about yourself for a minute. These invisible experiences are real. They distract from our performance. Which of these invisible experiences have you experienced on let's just call it a daily basis? Would love to see. Okay. A lot of overstimulation.
And I'm giggling inside because I'm like, nobody's saying under. That's the world we live in. We live in this
Yeah.
world that's way
Okay, we got somebody said
okay,
under
okay, all right. Because that happens too. I actually had, I was speaking with a client, a team member that was talking about understimulation yesterday and how how are you going to manage that for the workday?
Yep. And these, so as much as I wanted us all to think about us individually, that's what we did. Now I want us to take a step back and look at this list again for the people that we work with on a daily basis, and to remember that these are things that are affecting them too, right? So when we get real judgy about other people's performance, these are things that could be affecting the way that they're performing, the way that they're collaborating with you. So that level of awareness, again, self first, then moves to other awareness. How do these things affect other people? Moving to organizational awareness, how might these things and the culture that we built at my company, how might we be reinforcing some of these things when we don't want to, right? Especially the attention management struggles, the overstimulation. Manage that. We've got people coming back into the office or hybrid work. Manage what that office experience is like. Give people a budget if they work from home to build an office that is going to be one where they can be the most productive.
Right. And
your job is to help them with that.
And I love that you mentioned work from home, because I think a lot of times team members or managers and companies think work from home is a really cool perk and a benefit. Sometimes it's essential. Sometimes it's how you're going to get that highest level out of your employee, out of your manager, because they're able to manage the environment better than they would in the office or with their colleagues around. Because think about it, if somebody needs to hyper focus, let's say a couple days a week, and someone is walking past or bopping in, taking their attention away, they're not going to be very productive. And they don't have a lot of control over that. Versus if they establish, they say, like, I'm going to do Fridays at home. I'm going to do Tuesdays at home because I know I have to get through this report because I can control this environment. That's a benefit to the company. So it could go either way. It also if they can't control it, they don't have the ability to build that in another space. Yeah.
And I think what this does is it opens up an opportunity for self-advocacy and self-accommodating. So let's talk about that for a second, Stina, because I think everybody on the call, I want them to walk away with some knowledge about this, because just like self-awareness is a cue, if we need to do something about our self-awareness and what we're learning about ourselves, we have to learn to advocate and accommodate. So advocating, here's one thing I work with my clients on, is if you are feeling like your workload is too much, or even if you think you aren't being challenged appropriately, I say do a time study for 2 weeks. Track your big buckets of work, right? I call this a time pie. So track your time for 2 weeks. Be diligent about it. If you need to write it down in a notebook, there's apps for that, that you can use to track your tasks. Get an accurate description of what you're doing. And then once you see your time pie, set goals. That's not how, for example, the image on here, I might say, gosh, project XYZ is really taking up a lot of my time. See all that purple? I might want to step back and say, like, it can't take that much time. I'm going to devote less time to that and more time to what? Collaboration with my teammates, perhaps, right? So you can, with this data, now make changes. You can reclaim ownership of your time and make changes of this. So, and this is a tool that you can take directly to your leader. Look, I tracked my time for 2 weeks. I've got this data. If you are a leader out there and somebody on your team is either over or understimulated, and you can sort of tell, have them do this time study and then talk about the data together. What did we learn? Where do we need to make adjustments? What support do you need from me as your leader to get different results? Because I want you to get better and different results. So how can I support you? Right. What are the time, resources, and energy you need from me? So that's how I would say an individual can self-advocate, or if you're a leader, how you can ask your people to start self-advocating for themselves. Stina, talk to me about self-accommodating.
So within that self-accommodating, though, you need that time awareness ratio. You need the ability to identify, how does time pass for me? So that influences that planning that you're talking about. So I want to put more time into project XYZ, but I'm predicting it's going to take me 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. But your inner clock is not going to be exactly, most of us don't say a minute passes and I actually feel a minute passing. Most of us are not spot on. If you are out there, I am very jealous of you, because mine is 1.75. And that is not how I experience the world. But I would not have known that without doing, you have to do a self-observation and collect data. For this type of task, I'm predicting that I take this amount of time and this is what actually happens. And then do that over and over again to get your average, your ratio. Now, when you have that ratio, you use it to plan. XYZ, I think it's going to take me 2 hours, multiply it by that ratio.
Okay,
Use
so when
that
they are
number.
using, yeah.
And then
Let's say they want to go back and they want to do that time pie, Stina, how did you figure out that? So that's how you figured out your 1.75. Tell us exactly what that means. 1.75.
So that means like when I think that it's going to take me 5 minutes, it's really going to take me probably more like 8 and change.
Okay.
Right.
So, and this
well,
is
I will even round it up.
People on our team, how do they look at time? And it's not a downfall. It's just how they look at time. They might be off in their predictions.
Exactly. Well, most of us are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually cannot. I think I could probably count on one hand the number of conversations I've had where somebody was actually spot on.
Yeah.
And when I actually questioned it, I said, okay, let me observe you.
So once they do this, so once they do this time study, how do they self-accommodate? What changes can you make once you know this information about yourself?
So what you can do, so through that observation, you're gonna identify the time of day or the time or the days of the week that are going to be your ideal productivity time. So like I know that morning times are good for me for productivity. I also know that Tuesdays and Wednesdays I hyper produce because I've warmed up and I've gotten in there. So you start picking up on these patterns, and then you can self-accommodate where like I'm going to book all of my my creation appointments during this day during the week. So mine would be like Tuesday, Wednesday. And then when you feel like you're starting to dip with your attention and you need more engagement, that's when you book your meetings. Because conversations like these are naturally engaging. You're going to keep my attention more than if I'm dipping down in my attention. And I think that I'm using that 1.75 and it's going to take me, X amount of time. It's going to take me actually longer because my attention is going to need so much more energy to manage my focus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So being very strategic, you can self-accommodate in that way. And then you also get back to what you were talking about as self-advocacy. Coming to your manager and giving that information is powerful. It's not just saying, hey, I don't like a 9 a.m. meeting. It's saying, this is why I'm going to be more productive. We're going to get more out of me, and we're going to move forward together in a more productive and innovative way if we meet at 2.
Right.
That's valuable.
What I love about this is this is where I talk about being an impactful entrepreneur. Yes, you work for somebody else. You may not be an entrepreneur, but you can be an entrepreneur. You can reclaim ownership of your time. Mm-hmm. You can reclaim ownership of your calendar. And I'm not being naive to think everything on your calendar is going to be exactly how you want it because you get invited to a meeting. But what Stina and I are sharing is try your very best to accommodate for yourself. To set yourself up for better performance, to set yourself up from taking less energy to complete a task. By increasing your self-awareness, you're going to be better set up for that.
Right. Well, and giving meaning to that and collecting data. So it's not just, you're not just shooting the darts and seeing which ones land. You actually know why you're making the decision, why you're making a request, why you're trying something different. Right. The value of it. You're defining the value.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we have another poll we could throw up. I think
what I would be interested in is maybe the poll around common language. Let's talk about that for a second here. What this does for a team when you start to have conversations about where your strengths lie and where your preferences lie is you are empowering, right? These are the steps to building a high-performing team, right? Like we need to know we're making an impact. We have significance. We have meaning. We have structure and clarity. We have dependability. We have psychological safety. Those things will start building when you start having these conversations, when you're creating a common language around them. So yes, thank you. These are the top characteristics of a high-performing team. Google did some studies of their teams and said what makes them highly perform high. This is what they do. They have psychological safety. They feel like they can ask questions. They feel like they can fail fairly, right? Fail fairly is a term that I use. So by building these up, we are enabling, well, I should say, by enabling these conversations, we are building these up slowly, brick by brick. We are doing this. So I would be curious, just from your, let's throw this poll up here, from your personal experience for those on the call with us, which of these characteristics of a high-performing team does your company need to improve?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What's really at the heart of wanting to get to know each other and ourselves better? Is it impact, having significance? Is it something of meaning? Oh, structure and clarity. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
So talk about, I mean, structure and clarity. Geez, what we've talked about today, if we can get more organized in our own way of working and help others get organized in their way of working, we're going to have more clarity and more structure to our day and our handoffs. And it's going to become easier for us to trust and build psychological safety. They're very interconnected.
Right. And building that awareness of like, what is the structure, and giving that structure and clarity, having that awareness of what our agreements are for our work together. Awareness is that bottleneck to productivity. So the company's going to get more out of us as a team, as a whole.
Yep.
Well, and you know what's really cool about this too is from the studies, so psychological safety, dependability, structure, these are all totally linked to the hierarchy of needs, basic human needs.
Totally. Right. We're
100%. And these are the instinctual that you go for. You definitely need shelter and water. We know that we need that, but safety, that psychological safety is right in there, right at the base. And that belongingness, love, connection, we need that as humans. And we don't get to that cognitive level or self-actualization or esteem if these aren't first addressed. We cannot expect anyone to perform at those higher levels of cognitive performance if we don't address these. If they don't feel safe, if they don't feel seen, if they don't have the common language. And they also need to be able to see like, hey, I can succeed. So I'm going to try this initiative that you're rolling out. I'm going to actually engage in this.
Yeah, I have approached, I can just give you my personal testimony that I have approached my work much more from a place of curiosity and experimentation since I started to understand the concept of neurodiversity. It doesn't even matter that I am, it's just when I started to understand that and started to learn, it has just enabled me to have so much more rich conversations, so much more high performance because I understand myself better and I'm starting to understand others better too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love that. So Sina, let's can we open it up for questions, see if anybody has a question in the chat. I'd love to just hear.
I think we want to hold time for that. Absolutely.
So we'd love your questions. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about strengths or neurodiversity, performance at an organization. Just give it here a second here, Stina. As we're waiting for questions to come in, oh, here we go. As an administrator in schools, have there been conversations with businesses about students who went to school through COVID, students who see themselves on neurodiversity side on the scale is on the rise in school?
Mm-hmm. Right. So, and I've heard that as well. And I think part of that, I mean, we have to acknowledge that through COVID, there's this huge window that students students and adults, we all didn't have the opportunity to interact in the way that we had before, the opportunities for development. It changed. So it changed how what was normalized for interaction. I don't know if you noticed this, like when you came back and was trying to like reintegrate, it felt like way overstimulating. It was too much. I got really tired. I could only take a little bit of time. So our kids, our youth went through that too, but they went through this during the time when their brains were developing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I know somebody used the phrase COVID kid the other day, but I said, we've got COVID adults too. Like we went through the same experience. And what I think has changed and why maybe we're seeing an uptick in school, why we're seeing maybe an uptick in people being willing to talk about neurodiversity at work is because we started to rethink work. We started to reestablish our relationship between work and life and the harmony that existed through that. So I think that's what came out of it.
It's more awareness, and I think this is good. I think that it's good that there's more talk. I think that it's good that more folks are aware of the term neurodiversity and they're having these conversations because it's been there. It's been there.
Mhm.
And it also is something that we need to get better at addressing in schools, in businesses. I mean, because of also, I think about if we bring it into the company side, these are the parents too of these kids. So we can
Mhm.
address it in the schools, but if the parents don't have that as well, we're not addressing the whole community. And then in that sense, if we support our parents or support our professionals, we're impacting the work environment for what's happening now and the up and coming workforce
Yeah.
that are getting more and more of this training in schools. I wouldn't say it's normalized completely, but I do see more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had another question, Stina. In your experience, what would be the one initiative a company could put forth for the biggest impact for improving neuro inclusion as a way to get the ball rolling for more initiatives in the future?
I think it's get curious and ask the questions about their experience, and providing education and training on just common language so that you can start
Yeah.
modeling the conversations. Because until that is modeled, until it's normalized, you're not going to get the information that you need, and folks don't even know how to ask. So it's
Yep.
introducing the concepts and through titration, like we're to trickle it. So
Yeah.
you can just even like in your onboarding or when you're doing evaluations or you're doing check-ins, ask them if they, what have you found that be really helpful for you in being productive? How would you rank your productivity on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? What influences that? Asking questions, getting curious.
Yeah. And we both offer an assessment, right? So see, you
Yep.
got assessments. I use Gallup Clifton Strengths. Using an assessment builds a common language, right? So that can start to create conversation around what are we going to change now that we've got this common language. So even something like Strengths Finders, there's 34 strengths, but they're divided into 4 unique domains. Even just knowing those domains of execution, influencing, strategic thinking, and relationship building can create that common language within the team. So use the resources out there. You can go right to Gallup's website. You don't need me involved in doing the assessment, but the coaching that we do afterwards is, I say, a great place to start because it really helps them, again, build that self-awareness, start to include that other awareness. Getting to organizational awareness is the goal.
Yeah. And for our assessments, what's really cool is you use it to get a prober and you get to the baseline. You do the training, the education, you give them the knowledge because now that we've got more of that desire and then engagement, and now we're giving them knowledge through that, and then you do it again. And now they get to celebrate their wins. Wow, this really changed for me. And this is why that it's a dopamine hit. It feels good. It's pleasurable. I've succeeded. Look, I've made an impact in a positive way for myself and for my team. Not because I feel it, but because look, I have data to show it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are open for more questions here, so keep them coming. But while we have that, just in case, we like to be done at 5 till in case anybody has another meeting they run to. So let's just give you our contact information. If you need to run, we totally get that. Please have the questions keep coming in the chat, though. We'd love to talk.
Yep. And I have another request for those of you that do have the time and are willing to give feedback, because that helps inform the next event and how I facilitate and how we speak to that. So please, if you scan this code, you can give some feedback there. And then if you're interested, we even have a code for those of you that stick around to get something free. I like doing these kind of mini freebie, free EF mini sessions where we can dive into like the first part of identifying the executive functioning skills and where you're at. So you can start with that awareness. So if you have your awareness peaked and you want to dive into that a little bit, that's where it starts too. So that goes back to that question that we have. How do the initiatives? Well, I would say you start looking at yourself.
Very good. Very good. So they can get a free coaching session by using that QR code. Is that right? And putting in the code?
Put that code in and then type in the notes free EF. There's a link in the chat that was dropped too. That should take you to that.
Yeah,
But
we would
that
just love
remind you
everybody
that
to
you were
stay in
here.
touch. Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place for Stina and I. So please link into us, follow along on the journey. Stina's got a lot of great content that she's sharing out in terms of neuro inclusion. I really try to write about leadership and careers, having an impactful career. So this is really great opportunity to stay engaged.
Yes. And I also love it. There's a link in here too. I love the virtual copies. So that everybody across the world, I like having that one-on-one. I like getting to know you and the work that you're doing. So please feel free to use those links too. So follow on LinkedIn and then don't hesitate to reach out and let's have a coffee together.
That's great. So we'll stay on the line. If anybody has questions, drop them in the chat. We're happy to keep chatting. If you have to run, we're just so grateful for you being here. Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Ooh, Michelle has a question that she'd like to ask unmuted. Can we unmute?
I think so. Hold
Can
on.
we do that?
I think I.
Hello, all. Now, this was because I was just about to type something in the chat and I stopped as I did it. I was going to say, thank you, ladies. Now, depending on how somebody sees their pronouns, that may be inappropriate, right?
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Yeah, and right. And so I always I include mine. Absolutely. And I also, part of that too as a leader is that when you include yours, you're asking.
So to say something like that, thank you, ladies, would that be not to say that, or would that be offensive to some?
Could be offensive to some. So what I do is I use peeps. Some people say y'all, like
thank you all.
I have a habit of saying guys, like you guys, but that could be offensive. So I totally get it. But was that your question, Michelle, or do you have
Yeah,
something?
that was because I will often say thank you all, but as I went to type ladies, that's what popped into my head after your conversation. So thank you.
Yes.
Tina and Anna, I'll say it that way.
I use folks a lot.
Yeah.
Folks.
Yeah. You just steer away from that and then ask.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Asking.
I do have to jump. I have a call. Great
Thank you,
information.
Michelle.
Great to see you, Tina. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Michelle.
This was really fun. I was just thinking, and I guess unless somebody wants to ask a question, I think I'll keep talking. I was thinking about I think the virtual coffees are so meaningful because I get to ask questions like that. Like, what are your experiences? And I get to really model how to facilitate those conversations and what phrases or terms that you can use that are going to be neuro-inclusive. And really what's amazing with neuro-inclusion is that it has a lot of the practices that are inclusion inclusion of a lot of different identities as well. So it's a good practice. It's just a good model and structure to use. But I like those coffee chats. I like when people are interested in meeting one-on-one or meeting in a group and doing the virtual because we get to get into those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see, Anna, right now? Maybe you can speak to an example on teams. Are they having these conversations about neuroinclusion, neurodiversity? Are you finding that you're giving that language, modeling that language?
I think the language has to be modeled, but what I'm enthused about is that more companies seem to be having conversations about how do you work, right?
Yeah.
Because of this whole return to office, hybrid work, everybody's back and forth. Because of that, we're asking the questions, how do you like to work?
Yeah.
And I think just that basic question can open up so many avenues to us. So they may not know that they're being neuro-inclusive, but they're at least starting to have the conversations. And it's often powered by employees, right?
Mhm.
Employees are the ones saying, like, shouldn't we be talking about this? Or
Right.
stepping up, having a conversation with their leader about how they work. And then the leader goes like, oh, I should have that conversation with everybody. Yes, you should. Yes, you should.
Yes, you should. And what's I'm finding more and more too is that the big companies, they are actually have full-blown initiatives that they're calling neurodiversity. This is our neurodiversity department, our neuro inclusion initiative. And what I'm finding is that the need is for the company, like those that are following too, the mid-size, the small company, we need to make that more accessible in our world as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
we had somebody drop in a question, Stina, about have we created strategies for weaving this into performance reviews? You can go ahead. My 2 cents on performance reviews is as much as we can take out the scores and we can focus on actual work that people are doing and how they're doing it is an improvement in performance reviews. So that would be one place to start.
yeah, and I think because we focus so much on the skill areas and the knowledge of self, the awareness, is that it's giving the ability to make change. So rather than this performance review being something that could be punitive or it's an empowering tool to move forward. How are we moving forward? What is it that I'm learning about myself and my team? And sometimes it's just also identifying this person is really strong in this skill area and this area needs support, but this person is really strong here. So we're going to flip or we're going to put them together so that they can support each other in that seesaw. So I think absolutely there are strategies that weave into the performance reviews, but just using them you're not looking for a specific number or score, like you said. You're looking for how does this empower me? How does it inform my next decision of how to structure my team, of what trainings I'm going to give? Sometimes it's just giving them an option and bringing up, these are the tools and strategies. It seems really simple to somebody that already has that knowledge, but if nobody has ever brought it up or looked from the outside in, the team and the individual may not be aware of this simple little tweak that can make a world of difference in their day.
Agreed. So I know we're 2 minutes over, so I just want to, if everybody's still with us, thank you so much for staying with us on the question period here. Love to stay in touch with all of you, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Anna, for geeking out with me and having this wonderful conversation. This was such a blast.
Always. All right, friends. See you soon.
Bye.